I knew eventually I would have to make this video. And with every D2 creator putting up the funny I am quitting Destiny only to come back to D2 not even 2 hours later, I feel I should maybe put my own spin on this. I want to try and first say, no, this isn't a I am quitting Destiny video. My goal with this video is to precisely outline my grievances with the game, the developers, and the community itself. There is a high likelihood you are meeting me for the first time, so allow me to introduce myself. I've been playing Destiny since the alpha that was held on PS4 way back then. I almost have around 20,000 hours in Destiny 2, engaging with everything this game has to do, from patrols and the long forgotten adventures to master raids and solo flawlessing dungeons. I've done 4 day ones. All this has to say that I do have a handle on my knowledge and the game sense of Destiny. This video, as I said in the introduction, is to precisely outline my grievances with the game, but also highlight when Bungie made decisions I think benefited the community, as well as address common trends I see in the community that negatively impact us all, not just game balance, but sentiment as well. I will try to do my best to do segments in the timeline so you can skip around to specific topics you might want to hear. However, it will be best to experience this from start to finish like an essay to understand the context behind certain statements made. Very last thing. This video is not a hit piece on the developers. This video is also not a public tar and feathering of your favorite content creator. I will critique these pillars of our community and even the over masses of the D2 player base. Understand this isn't a personal attack on you. There are just my overall observations I've made throughout my 10 years of playing Destiny 2 and engaging with the community itself. I want to start with PvE. While Destiny 2 isn't a PvE only game, I would say it's the biggest part of D2. You may disagree with this, and this isn't me saying PvP should be removed. However, we can't deny the huge disparity in content and development time for each. Something I finally see people mentioning with PvE and actually drilling down on is this horrible onboarding process for new players within this game. I am actually happy to see content creators championing this because previously many held the stance of as long as we keep the old guard happy, we'll be fine. And that selfish approach has made it to where we are a small island of endgame players checking off our to-do list and then going to a game that is much more fun to play. In the end, that's what PvE has turned into, a rhythmic weekly chore list to do. Destiny 2 needs a base game story that is not only something new for everyone to enjoy and play, but also covers the basics of the Destiny universe. We need something to explain why humanity is relegated to one city. Who are the Fallen? Why are they called the Fallen? Who are the Hive? Why do they want to kill everything? Who's the Cabal? Why do some Cabal want to kill us and some don't? Etc, etc, goes on. Something that gives a quick overview of the universe and can put the community, not just new people, in the direction of the main evolving story that's been told throughout the years. Not only that, but something that also needs to happen is we need to go back to expanding the universe. I understand with us being towards the end of a story, we need to become more focused and want to focus on the witness and the final shape. However, I feel it's time for Bungie to not only experiment with new types of stories, but develop the malnourished seeds of this universe. Not everything needs to end in a boss fight, something I will talk about more when we get to the storytelling section of this video. We need content that onboards players, not just the starting point. We need what I'm calling a mid-game. Currently, if Destiny was a race and we were at the starting line, when you start Destiny, you do 2 steps and you are at the finish line. Because in the end, Destiny is just an endgame game. There is no middle, there is no start. Now yes, when you play the game, you start at level 1700, but maybe it's just my weird brain. I think it's messy. I think it doesn't really translate to a new player. There is no real sense of progression if you are starting at level 1700 and finish at 2000. It just makes the numbers feel arbitrary. I feel a system similar to Destiny 1 would not only be more efficient, but lower the numbers drastically so that it doesn't feel meaningless. Start at level 1, and for the first, let's say 50 levels, it's all XP. 51 through 70, you start doing the item level power system. Anything levels you up. 71 through 90, only powerfuls and pinnacles, and from 91 to 100, only pinnacles get you to the final level. Something simple like Destiny 1 where we have experience levels and then the last 10 levels are all powered through traditional item level. This streamlines numbers, translates better to player progression, and doesn't look stupid being on arbitrary level 1700 at the start of the game. And before you say, well, there is a mid game, what is it? Grinding out raids for the patterns that you are doing in the end game? You could argue the endgame is soloing GMs, raids, and dungeons, but I feel that is such a niche part of the community that to call that the real endgame is ill-informed. It would be like me saying the endgame is doing world's first raiding. While correct, it's part of it, it isn't the overall picture of the endgame experience. That's why when people say this game doesn't have an endgame, I fervently disagree. This game has an endgame. It's the only thing that this has. There is nothing in the middle to differentiate each other's skill or point in the journey. The only difference you can tell between each other is an arbitrary number. The only difference we can tell between each other is arbitrary numbers next to easily acquired titles and or how many patterns someone has compared to you. Destiny, and even Destiny 2, used to have a mid-game. Well, maybe a skeleton, I should say, which was the chase for min-maxed rolls or god rolls of weapons. However, with the introduction of crafting, that has all but disappeared. Now, I know a lot of my casual chads will hear that and instantly write me off as a hater of crafting or some elitist cuck. I'm not. I actually love crafting. I just feel adding crafting made clear the main issue of Destiny, and that this game currently, with the way it's been made since D1, probably is just grinding for perfect loot. So when you introduce a system that gives you the ability to acquire that perfect loot for the fraction of the usual time, you kill off the main reason people want to play. I don't want crafting to go. However, it should be refocused. Possible limitations on what weapons can be crafted, the removal of enhanced perks from base weapons, only given to weapons like adept weapons, possible reintroduction of the concept Destiny was originally sold to us on, which was weapons you earn or craft. The more you use them, the more powerful they become over time. So if you truly, let's say, are a big fan of Shadow Price from Strikes, and were able to craft it, you make a base copy. Only by using it for a prolonged time could it have that power of enhanced perks. Shit, if it was more than just an XP system tacked on to the weapons and was like actual kills, actual use of the gun, I think it would be more fun to see where you could have an entire perk column on the gun be active. It'd be broken, yes, but in the end would be fun. However, it would probably be broken in PvP. I can see why that doesn't happen. Speaking of PvP, perfect segue inbound, let's talk about it. I think now would be a perfect time to engage with PvP. I will be completely honest, I am not a high-skilled PvPer. I have my moments. I have gone flawless in trials, and gone flawless in trials when it first came back and it wasn't as forgiving. I have played comp and got into legend back when Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten was a thing. So I usually say I'm average, above average at best. So I won't talk on meta. I just want to talk about the one sentiment I see a lot of PvEers that say PvP should be removed. While I understand because of the poor state PvP is in and how toxic it has become from the community to the streamers, to the meta abusers, this game has always had PvP as a core fundamental part of the game. The issue is that PvP for the longest time has been some of the most unfun, tryhardy gameplay where average or casual players have honestly disengaged. I don't know how to get people to re-engage. I can only give my perspective why I try my best to stay away from PvP as much as possible. And maybe through that, we could possibly see a solution. And it's honestly just not fun anymore. Everyone is trying to jump pixel peak ability spam, and that over optimization of the PvP gameplay has turned it honestly into a shit show. Maybe leave a comment down below on what you would do, but I have no solution for this part of the game. Iron Banner needs to have more loot. That isn't just bring back old guns from previous seasons to make me grind it because it has a new perk pool. Honestly, bring back some D1 guns if you are entirely too lazy to create Iron Banner specific weapons, because earning a Vanguard weapon that just has an Iron Banner medallion slapped on it is getting boring. This mode is supposed to feel like Dark Age fantasy armor and guns. Let me see that. Trials is a whole conundrum in itself. The game mode is supposed to be the pinnacle of PvP skill expression, being able to go flawless on a card and get some of the best loot you can acquire through that side of the game. However, reality is, it's just a slots game where you hope you don't go against a carry squad or streamer carry squad, where the loot doesn't really mean all that much, only for some specific examples, and even then usually it's only better than its PvE variant by a few percentage points. You then get stuck in a paradox. Do you make it easier for players to win matches or easier streamlined loot acquisition? Well, if you do, you ruin the prestige and overall image of the mode. Do you keep it the way it is, just adding more loot? well then you don't really address the problem with the mode and not being fun to the majority of the player base, and watch the pool of players who do engage with it shrink over time. I don't think that carries or streamers are the problem for the mode. They are just a symptom of players not wanting to engage with the mode but still wanting the loot. I feel a trials card called Passage of Certainty was added, and basically you just had to win 7 matches, not in a row, but just had to win 7, and you got to go to the lighthouse or get the adept weapon for the weekend one time. Could easily see a huge bump in players, at least for the first day. Or if you want to leave the lighthouse as a 7 wins in a row exclusive and say, hey, if you do the Passage of Certainty, turn it into Saint 14 for an adept reward. I still think you get players who want the loot, you give them exposure without the pressure of having to win matches in a row, and you keep the prestige of going to the lighthouse. The last of the 3 core modes, and often the most forgotten even by the devs, is Gambit. Honestly, I'm one of the few people out there who genuinely enjoy Gambit. However, there are core problems with the mode down to the conceptual level. I mean, how many different iterations has Gambit gone through to make the mode fun for people and failed on each one? I can't tell if it's the invaders that ruin the mode, if it's the length of the matches, or if it's just the mode itself. Now, I know some of the changes I'm going to propose will once again change it at a fundamental level. However, it's either we do one last iterative change or just forget about the mode completely. You could go with the popular route I see a lot of people say, which is a competitive PvE. You remove invaders and just have Gambit matches as normal. While I see where this comes from, since invaders can honestly change the entire course of a match, directly impact your mood on the mode, I don't see this being that fixed that you think it would be. I mean, let's just say they did this. All Gambit would become is an over-optimized team of builds that solve every possible scenario your team can be put through. This over-optimization can lead to moments where a team will lose just because they didn't run a specific Gambit build, which can be unsatisfying and cause players to disengage. I think a better change would be keeping the idea of making Gambit a PvE mode, however turning it into something like Onslaught, where lore-wise and gameplay-wise, the Derelict is sending players through different pivotal moments of the story, where you are, let's say, in the tower defending against the Red Legion. You have 3 waves you have to survive and a final boss wave with a specific mechanic tied to it. That's not too challenging so that match-made teams could actually do it, with secondary optional objectives that, if done, boost rewards and rep at the end of a match. Now, we throw in a Gambit-specific twist. A gambling mechanic. Make it where before getting sent into the map, each player puts up a specific amount of glimmer or crafting material, say 100,000 glimmer. If you're able to win this match, do the side objectives, you get a 1.25 times on that glimmer as a reward. However, if you lose, you just lost 100,000 glimmer. This makes Gambit unique from Onslaught and from strikes with stakes, makes Gambit actually feel like a Gambit. Removes the pressure and dissatisfaction of dealing with an invader, and allows for build diversity and could be a possible fix for Gambit. You could also make a Gambit the roguelike mode. Bungie has been recently experimenting with this. You could make it where the Derelict lore-wise is a scar in time, and when you go through, you're going through, say, I can run the Gambit of Destiny's greatest hits. I'll put X amount of glimmer or crafting material up with these amount of modifiers, and every path I continue to go down in this mode, I'll get X amount back. Keeps the spirit and lore of it being a collection of bad guys across the system the Drifter collects to have Guardians fight in a Gambit for loot. And if we are gonna talk about gambling in the game, we should talk about the economy of Destiny 2. The economy and the sorry state it's in. It's honestly the fault of Bungie's inability to innovate on content and the push from content creators like Datto saying how currency should be capped. Perfect example is Legendary Shards, which was broken due to multiple times where the game had a bug where you could generate an infinite amount of shards, which then, as well coupled with the fact that Bungie has never introduced proper long-term currency dumps, made a situation with a broken economy where players had way more money than was needed since the game had nowhere to spend it. Other games have currency dumps that you can engage with. MMOs use player housing. We could have had more community events that require donations of said currency. Could have a clan dojo system like Warframe that incorporates currency dumps. However, when the most expensive item is high-grade crafting material, only worth a few hundred shards, which also have a very low cap on how many you can have at one time, you have no way to really spend the tens of thousands of shards you earn through a glitch. Caps to currencies only highlight that that game or economy has no real mechanical intrigue besides just being a hindrance to long-term play. As I said, we could introduce player housing, clan housing, add vendors for high-end game players to spend currency on to unlock stuff. Obviously good ideas of having the ability to buy high-grade and low-grade crafting materials. However, these should not be capped. This promotes spending, not hoarding. In the end, however, no matter how much you promote the player to spend, some will always hoard. Just because some players, or even if I grant most players, hoard currency does not mean we should punish with caps on those players who hoard and who don't. Systems should always be open to players to engage with Destiny the way they want. I didn't know how to cut to this, but I really want to talk about the community next. It's something that is vital to a live service game, or even any franchise as a whole, to be honest. And the health of this community is bad, to the point where we have 1000% accurate memes about the mood cycle of the community, where the roller coaster of hype to hate to is ever chugging along, which is kind of why I wanted to make this video and upload it now. With the newest episode soon to be dropping and new content on the horizon or coming out now, most of you will have hit the switch and go back to singing the praise of the game, completely dropping the critiques you've made, and the glaze train will continue. While on the flip side, some of you are forever on the hate bandwagon this IP has had since the launch of it in Destiny 1. Now, I'm not going to pretend that these devs or this IP has not deserved the ire of its fans from time to time. With poor decision making and never consistently seizing the full potential of Destiny. However, some of you make it a career to shit on this game, while being some of the first to load in to connect to the server queues. But that little rant isn't really productive. I just want you, the viewer, or you, the content creator, to take actions on your behalf and no one else to be a better person. Give Bungie criticism, and if you want to be a dick about it, go ahead. However, I am tired of the hypocrisy we as a community will have with us complaining about Bungie not being open or communicating with us, when even a small change that isn't that popular can result in a community member doxing, sending death threats, harassing families over a video game. I fully believe you should be able to call these devs pig-headed in their decision making, and I'm not saying you need to be nice about it. The truth is that the content creators who push always being positive, that messaging never works. There's a reason why negativity pushes the needle faster and more accurately than positivity. However, some of you are genuinely insane and have pushed Bungie to be more careful and more silent. I am personally tired of the clout-hungry content creators who will supply the salt factories of players to enable toxic mindsets. Salt factories will always be a thing in every community. That's just the nature of the business. But creators have a unique skill in maximizing impressions at the detriment of the game in a way I don't see any other community deal with. When YouTubers are drumming up drama and or just talking about how D2 is not a viable place to make content, when they themselves are lazy and making boring half-baked guide videos, but on the other hand, that's all the community wants to see. So this cycle of boring content and hate content is self-fulfilling, so complaining about it feels nonsensical. Maybe this point makes no sense and it just seems whiny, that as from one creator to another, maybe you will see some more success in your content if you take a different approach besides the 10-minute dragged out video talking about the TWAB or some guide video for the quote-unquote super easy game. On the flip side, Bungie actually needs to make the game interesting, which is going to bring us to the most divisive topic of the video: difficulty and loot. Let's discuss loot first. I really want to talk about this because this, I feel, is one of the core issues when it comes to this game, is loot has become easier and easier to get. However, if you listen to other creators, they would say making the game more challenging and that wiping of our vaults would be the way to go. Yeah, I want to be honest with everyone. Ask yourselves, if my vault was wiped, would you want to regrind for the same loot again? And before you say, well, obviously if they wipe our vaults, we would get new stuff, which you are right. But look at the expansion's new sets of loot. How it's usually just 5 to 6 guns, most of which are just touched up or repainted models from an old season's weapon base or DLC. Why would I give up my God Roll BXR and then be asked next year to grind out a RXB with the same model as the BXR? This argument would hold more merit in my eyes if guns were different with perk pools, design, and came in a set where you can see how easily it is to build craft with each other. But I'm not gonna just arbitrarily have my 120 hand cannon become useless so that the issued quote new 120 hand cannon is better only because my light level goes up. Because let's be honest, the perks do not drastically change like how some would have you believe. This is why concepts like wipes just don't fix the issue for Bungie specifically, because on one hand, Bungie has become lazy. I agree with Dado and others who say we need to wipe our arsenals to make the game fun, but I only agree with that if it was a different studio who showed me that over time, each wipe, those guns would actually be different and not just in strength, but in uniqueness. However, Destiny 2 has one other mountain-sized problem, an endless vortex of argumentation that even spans far past Destiny. Difficulty. Difficulty is in the eyes of the beholder, and if I just left it at that, it would be boring and unsatisfying. I'll be honest, I like the game being easy. Easy games are fun. The truth is, the game's combat difficulty isn't what's making this not a fun or engaging game. It's that formula Bungie has used, and overall the same build all three classes have across the board make it to where the game feels the same across the entire spectrum. No unique engagement. When stuff is broken or viable, it's only one aspect of a class or one type of gun, or in some cases one gun that is viable, leaving other options to feel useless, leaving other classes to feel not as good. Instinctually, you want to propose making the game harder so that your neurons are firing on all cylinders and the game feels interesting again. I say you're wrong. And actually, the issues with build diversity, loot diversity, would just become more exaggerated. That's why most GMs back in the day were just plinking bosses or challenging the enemy at the back of the map, because when you give me infinite ammo and make it to where I peek for more than 5 seconds, I get one shot, I'm just gonna sit in the back of the map behind a rock. You make the game a boring experience, yet you can't make it too easy. You need shit to be engaging, which is why I'm gonna be honest. I don't mind the difficulty where it's at. While GMs are soloable, I say, why not? People often see a popular creator or streamer do it, or some random top 5% player, and say, oh, that must be the state of the game. I'm not gonna lie and say you need a big in-depth understanding. This game has always been, if you bring the right stuff, it's a cakewalk. But just because a streamer, or hell, let's say 15% of the players could solo GMs, doesn't mean that there is something wrong with the game in my eyes. Yes, you can solo raid encounters through bugs and hyper-specific builds and skill. Is that really something we should be worried about? Not everything should be contest mode, and I know that's not what people want, but I don't think everything should be GM level either. GMs and raids should be not as easy as strikes, but on the other hand, I've seen how Destiny tackles difficulty. We can't have challenging gameplay in this game without the broken builds. I'm sorry. If we nerf builds back and back, all gameplay will turn into, my opinion, will be plinking from the back of a room and some weird oob that a YouTuber shows the community. And I know saying not everything should be contest mode is a bad reduction of the argument of making the game harder, but I feel the way that people want to make the game harder isn't going to result in the engagement they want. The cuck response is this game will never be balanced, and that's just a boring response. I want this game to retain its difficulty in contest mode. I also feel that master difficulty raids should be similar to that difficulty as well, because master raiding should be the place where teams and prospecting teams can not only push for the best gear in the game, but also train for the next race. Maybe make it to where patterns for raid weapons exclusively drop from master raids, so that by doing the raid at its peak form, you have truly mastered that content and can craft the perfect gun from that specific piece of content. I don't know. I feel like nothing is hard in this game or worth being hard because none of the rewards matter. Why do master raids when I can craft the loot to be just as good if not better? Why do master raids for armor focusing when I can just do a much easier master dungeon encounter and farm there? Which is kind of my biggest problem with Destiny. Destiny's issues seem like simple changes could be made and we'd all be set. The truth is that all these core fundamental issues are tied together. You can't just make the game harder because rewards aren't there to justify the challenge. You can't just mindlessly power creep the rewards because the challenge would disappear. You can't spend time creating a proper early and mid game because we're stuck on a seasonal cadence that is killing the game. You can't stop the seasonal cadence, otherwise the community overreacts and says the game is dying. But by the time a coin is flipped, be the first to load the game up. There are minor things we could add, but they would be band-aid fixes, I feel. Strike exclusive loot would feel good for a couple seasons until that loot itself became obsolete in appearance and power, or it just might drop mediocre. After hearing all that, you might say, well, why not just make Destiny 3? You could, but the resources required to do that are out of Bungie's reach. The developers who have to make strikes into campaign missions because they can't afford to make them separate. I don't think they can properly pump out a whole new game without completely halting production on Marathon. I think the challenges we need can easily be done in Destiny 2. However, I don't really want to talk about Destiny 3 in this video, as it's a big topic. Just know, I personally don't think that's the best option for us. As enticing as it sounds, I will most likely make another video on the topic. Finally, the most important part of the game, something I know I am probably alone on, but I feel it is core of any media: the story. I have really simple critiques with the story, down to the formulaic pattern this universe seems to be in, down to the characters being wasted, and the complete lack of new interesting characters to push the narrative forward. But let's go one point at a time, and let's start with the mystery of Destiny 2, in my opinion, is all but gone. If it hasn't been retconned for the sake of simplifying the story because we as a community didn't like it when Bungie would go offbeat in the Light and Darkness saga, so it was cut out, or because the writers were too lazy to include them in the story, it was removed. Factions and how the politics of the city are was really interesting. Even more interesting when you introduced the Refugee Fallen, which actually sparked some very interesting story about harboring your once oppressors, only to see that the Guardians also oppressed the Fallen. The thing is that it was interesting, but after that season, because writers were lazy, is my only explanation, we just completely removed all the other factions. Why? It's like this universe used to have so many unanswered questions that didn't need to be answered. They were good ways at deepening the pool and making the world feel lived in. Now the entire universe revolves around Zavala, Ikora, Osiris, Saint, Petra, Mara, Crow, Eris, and that's kind of it. We have good supporting characters too, but if an event in the world is happening or we go on an adventure, it always revolves around one of these characters. Star Wars suffers from this, where any piece of media nowadays that drops where some previous popular character like Luke, Skywalker, Ahsoka, or Vader has to pop up. This makes what feels like a vast world suddenly shrink because adventures are always revolving around the same bunch of characters, down to the point where we are calling seasons the Awoken season, the Eris season, because we knew what characters would appear in them. New characters are introduced in expansions, but only used as bridges to explain that expansion's patrol zone, which is boring. Best example of this is the Conductor. It would have been so cool if it was a person or being that we've never seen or met. A being who was the originator maybe of the Vex, their creators. No, it's Maya Sundaresh. I know that she not only was explored in previous lore tabs, hinted at in strikes, and explored as an extra audio logs on Neomuna, but damn man, why can't she just be a shadow of the past? Something that we will never get answers to, something we have to piece the story together on our own. No, you take that away from us and then give us the most boring option. She found a crown, wants to control the Vex, to then control us, to then lead us down the perfect timeline. Like, why is she a more boring witness? This could have been a new character to explore with all reasons on their own. The universe of Destiny has become shallow. The story is focused on such a small cast of characters that all know each other. And any side character, in any side story that does pop up, it's related in some way to the main cast. This isn't the only thing. I'm really tired of the creation of interesting characters who are instantly killed in their introduction story, because I don't know why. I honestly have no clue why we killed Rolk in the raid. It would have been much more interesting to see him kind of as a returning villain from season to season who has some beef with Callus. As Rolk is an actual believer in the final shape, he could see Callus as an opportunist for power. It adds more depth to the witness and more of a threat to the darkness because we see more raid level threats who are a threat to us. Also adds unique interactions between characters and more ways to explore characters besides having a relative or acquaintance give me an exposition dump while I watch a slideshow. You can also explore villains as characters through their interactions with other villains. It also gives a face to a movement or a faction. When Rolk was first introduced, we saw him in his pyramid. Thinking of every ship the Witness had someone on that level made their faction seem threatening. Figuring out that they were all basically empty or filled with just the Fallen or the Hive immediately killed all sense of threat with the faction, and we just were worried about the Witness. I could be wrong, but it would have been very interesting to have factions of enemies be filled with actual characters, rather than just always the single figurehead with a bunch of named bosses that got names from a random generator. The Witness and his disciples felt like opening villains of the year, and then it was time to deal with something else that was more pressing. Savathun and later the Witness were the only villains who really felt like overarching like main threats. More Savathun than the Witness, to be honest. This makes them feel more threatening, and not only that, but I need villains to actually win on some level to display their competency and why I need to worry about them. It often feels like the only reason we ever fear a new villain is because one of the main cast says that they could end the world if they win over and over until they are dead, which isn't as satisfying as watching orcs destroy a Cabal base head on, while usually Guardians have to sneak through the whole back door to achieve the same outcome. With the new episodes, it seems like this won't be changing, and with leaks I see, or should I say the marketing, it just seems to be doubling down. I love the universe of Destiny, and funny enough, the story has usually been the main thing that has me kept engaged with the game, and I love the universe, and I see it has so much potential, but with incompetent writers who can't seem to seize that lightning in a bottle, I don't know what needs to change to let that happen. Some honorable mentions I wanted to talk about but didn't feel needed an in-depth discussion about. Please stop the day of marketing. No one gives a fuck about a trailer or dev stream for new content the night before the day of. I am more focused on getting the game to install the update and load in before others onto the server. You guys used to be great at generating hype, but Bungie have fostered a toxic sentiment in the community that is so desperate for knowledge on what's next. You have entire channels and accounts dedicated to leaks. Leaks are Destiny's marketing, and it fucking blows. Clans feel just like LFG shorteners and an extra 5 powerful engrams. Clans never have any story, gameplay, or even meaningful loot impact on the game. Clans have literally no point besides what used to be clan staves until they stopped making them, which still to this day, I never got a response from any of the staff on why they did that. Last person I was able to get in contact with, well, they're fired, so there's no point even bringing them up. Clans have no identity unless you are a group of content creators who have fan bases, and even then, that's only clout outside the game and nothing in game. I've said on stream before how cool it would be if clans had a dojo system from Warframe, a custom shader you could create through the website and unlock colors by completing challenges as a clan in game, a clan armor set exclusive to clans. Nope, nothing. Which then makes me wonder what's the point of really having them. That's kind of all I got. The future of Destiny is different. Different in a way that is both good and bad, with the main aspect of what was holding Destiny together being the main 10-year-long story out of the way. We've really had our eyes open to the actual state of Destiny 2. Bungie has remotely zero faith left with us, and I don't think that it will ever be earned back until we are shown a history of good decisions and progress for the game. I also don't think that overall negative sentiment that is throughout this community will change until devs earn that trust back and change what they are doing. In the end, we all have our vision on the direction Destiny should take. I'd love to have further conversations with you down in the comments. For the others who are just going to type a dumb comment, thanks for the boost in the algorithm. Really means a lot. Like I said, I'm not quitting Destiny, but I really wanted to list out my grievances with this game. And thank you for your time, and have a good rest of your day.